Welcome, everybody. My name is Eloy Ortega, and I am a full stack web developer and a multimedia designer. This is a web series on web development. Just a quick little intro on me. I have 30 years of experience in visual design, 20 years of experience in web development, 10 years in education. I've been an instructor in the New York City Department of Education, BMCC, City Tech, as well as nonprofits like OBT and YDC. So let's jump into it. We have 3 objectives in this series. The first is to understand the concepts behind each application and language that we'll be covering, learn how to build websites and web applications, and the third is to problem solve for project specifications and programming bugs. The first core concept that we have here is between the client and the server. These are the technologies that we use in order to access the internet. When we are talking about the client, we are referring to either the hardware or the software that a user is accessing in order to get on the internet. So we could be referring to either a device or we could be referring to software. So for example, an iPhone would be considered a client, as well as Safari, which is software that's running on the iPhone. Regardless of whether or not you're talking about the software or the hardware, a user goes onto a web browser and types in a URL. They type in a web address and then they hit go. What happens then requires the next 2 pieces of technology. We have the ISP. This is your internet service provider. So Optimum, T-Mobile, AT&T, those are services that a user pays for in order to access the internet. When we send the request to access a website like mycompany.com, that request goes to your ISP. Your ISP then looks for the server where that website is pointing to and then accesses it or sends a request to it. The server is a physical machine that is responsible for receiving and sending data, and it is storing websites and web applications. So a user goes in and types in mycompany.com on the client. They hit go. It goes through the ISP, and then the ISP looks up the appropriate server to find that web page. So the server receives that request, looks up the appropriate data, and sends it back. And that data is usually in the form of, number 1, a web page, and number 2, any assets that are needed for that web page to perform correctly, such as media, so images, audio, video. All of that will be sent back, style sheets, and JavaScript files. So all of those things can be sent back. One caveat to know here is each one of these files is a separate trip. So if you have a web page and it has 2 images on it, and that's it, then the server is going to send 3 data packages, 1 for the web page, and then 1 more for each image. So that's 3 responses from the server. So a little bit more information on the URL or the web address. URL is short for Uniform Resource Locator. Just to boil it down really simply, it cuts up into 3 parts. There are more things that you can add to a URL, and we'll discuss those later, but these are the core 3 that we are going to be focusing on now. The first is the protocol. The protocol tells your client how to behave with the data that it's receiving from the server. The one that you typically see for a web page is HTTP or HTTPS. HTTP is short for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and basically all that means is that it's your web browser is expecting a HTML package that it needs to interpret. This also expands out into other languages like CSS and JavaScript, which we'll talk about later. But there are different ways in which you can access data from the internet. HTTP is the one that we commonly use when we are on a browser. The S is for security. What that does is it makes sure that any sensitive information that is passed between the client and the server is encrypted. So if I'm trying to access a website where I need to send a password or credit card information, I want to make sure that that S is there in the URL, because that's going to ensure that my sensitive information is protected as it travels to and from the server. Without that, bad actors could be monitoring the traffic that's going to and from a website, and they could easily read all the information that you're sending, like passwords and credit card information. But with that one little S, which requires a SSL certificate on the website, what that does is it encrypts the data so they can see that the traffic is coming and going, but they can't decipher it. So that protects your data. The next part is the domain. If I'm going to artbyeloy.com, I'm going to see my portfolio site. Meanwhile, if I type in facebook.com, I'm going to see a very different site. If I type in youtube.com, I'm going to go to a different place. So the domain is which website are we accessing. Now, if I stop there, just the protocol and the domain, then I'm automatically going to land in whatever the home page is for that website. And there are caveats to that. So if I'm not logged into YouTube and I type in youtube.com, I'm going to get to a page that is not customized for me. But if I am logged into YouTube, then I will see that same page and it will have my custom videos. So the videos that the YouTube algorithm has selected as suggestions for me to watch. Same thing with an app like Instagram or Facebook. If I'm not logged in, I'm going to see a login page. And if I am logged in, then it'll take me straight into my homepage for those applications. If I want to go to a specific place that's not the homepage, then that's where we get to this green section over here, the sub page. The sub page allows us to bypass the homepage and go directly to a specific page on that website that we're looking at. So in this case, if I type in /portfolio.html, I will go to a very specific page that's on my portfolio site. Okay, a little bit more information on the domain. Every server and also every website has a unique IP address. It's a numeric designation. This is the address for a specific server. And when we type in a domain name, we are typing in the alias for that IP address. Now that's very similar to how we interact with phone numbers on our mobile devices. So I make a new friend, his name is Bob. Bob is a pretty cool guy and I want to hang out with him later on. Bob gives me his phone number, 212-123-4567. I'm not going to remember that number, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my phone, I'm going to type in that number, and then I'm going to add Bob to my contacts. So this way, when I want to call Bob later, I'm just going to look up Bob, and I will be calling 212-123-4567. So the same concept works here. When I type in artbyeloy.com, the ISP will look up the IP address that's associated with artbyeloy.com and find the appropriate server and connect to it to send my request.